Are you feeling stressed out? You might be surprised to learn just how much stress can impact your brain. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating neurobiology of stress and discover the science behind how it affects your mind and body. What is stress? Now, what better way is there to start a discussion about how the body responds to stress than to start with what stress itself is? So, stress is a natural response we all experience from time to challenging or threatening situations. It's a survival mechanism that has evolved over time to help us cope with danger and uncertainty. Stress can be triggered by basically anything from everyday responsibilities like work and family to serious life events such as a new diagnosis, war, or the death of a loved one. Naturally, when we're put under stressful conditions, our body reacts in order to protect us and help us deal with the situation. This reaction is triggered and controlled by a very special connection known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis in short. This is one of the key pathways involved in the neurobiology of stress. It is so called because it involves the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands. Like other exocrine glands in the body, these glands produce hormones and release them directly into the blood. From there, the hormones are transported to the organs where they exert their functions. The HPA axis begins with the hypothalamus, a small organ that sits in the brain. When we encounter a stressful situation, this organ produces signals in the form of a hormone known as corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH in short, that is sent to the pituitary gland through a venous connection that exists between the two organs. Like other releasing hormones produced by the hypothalamus, the corticotropin releasing hormone causes the pituitary gland to release a hormone, in this case, the adrenocorticotropic hormone, also known as ACTH in short. ACTH is then transported through the blood vessels to the adrenal glands, two glands that are located just above the kidneys, one on each side of the body. At the adrenal glands, ACTH stimulates the release of some groups of hormones known popularly as stress hormones. One of these hormones is a very popular one known as cortisol. Cortisol then goes on to act on the human, altering some very important functions of several organs. Cortisol's effects on the body. Now that we've been exposed to the stress hormone cortisol, let's take a look at the effects of cortisol on the body. We shall look at both the metabolic and physiological effects of this hormone. The metabolic effects of a hormone explore how it affects different molecules that make up the body, including carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, while the physiological effects determine how it affects the functions of several organs. Speaking of the metabolic effects, one of the most commonly known metabolic effects of cortisol on the body is its effects on the level of glucose, a very popular carbohydrate in the body. You see, when cortisol is released, it causes the level of glucose in the blood to increase. Cortisol does this in two ways. One, it causes the liver to produce glucose from a storage compound known as glycogen, as well as from other molecules like amino acids and fats. Subsequently, the liver releases all this glucose into the blood. Secondly, it prevents the muscles from taking up any of the glucose that is released into the blood, even going to the extent of acting against insulin, the hormone that reduces glucose levels in the blood by making the organs insensitive to it. This means that even though insulin may be present in the blood, it's virtually useless. Now, since we've seen the metabolic effects of cortisol, let's explore the physiological effects of this hormone. Cortisol is a hormone that affects several organs. In terms of the circulatory system, cortisol causes an increase in blood pressure as well as the rate at which the heart pumps blood. However, the heart is not the only organ whose rate of function is increased by cortisol. The lungs also suffer the same fate. At the level of the respiratory system, cortisol causes an increase in the rate of breathing. Now, while the circulatory and respiratory systems are stimulated by cortisol, the immune system experiences the opposite. It's suppressed by cortisol. When cortisol levels in the blood increase, it suppresses the activity of the immune system, reducing inflammation and other immune responses. The aim of this is to reduce inflammation. Like the immune system, another system whose function is also suppressed by cortisol is the digestive system. At the level of this system, cortisol reduces the blood that is sent to the digestive system and opposes secretions from the glands that make up this organ system. Effects of chronic stress on the brain. Having looked at the effects of cortisol on the body, let's take a look at what exactly chronic stress does to one of the most important organs in the body, the brain. You see, the chronic effects of stress on the brain are largely dependent on the long-term exposure of the brain to the stress hormone cortisol. In the long term, cortisol significantly affects mood. In fact, elevated cortisol levels and chronic stress have been linked to increased anxiety and depression. This means that people exposed to stressful conditions are more likely to experience depression states than those who lead normal, happy lives. The impact of chronic stress on memory and learning. Aside from mood, another thing that cortisol has been found to affect is cognitive function. This has to do with learning and memory formation. While cortisol makes glucose available for the brain to use, which in itself is quite good, in the long term, however, cortisol causes a condition known as hippocampal atrophy. This means that it causes the hippocampus to shrink in size. Now, because the hippocampus is a very important part of memory formation and learning, its reduction in size causes memory impairment. It's no wonder that chronic stress has been linked time and again with the development and progression of several neurocognitive diseases, including dementia and Alzheimer's disease. The role of genetics in stress response. So far, we've seen that stress is a normal part of life. However, everyone doesn't respond to stress the same way. Our response to stress is largely dependent on two factors: our environment and our genetics. Environmental factors that greatly influence how a person responds to stress includes their upbringing, life experiences, as well as their social support. On the genetic end of the spectrum, researchers theorize that how a person responds to stress is largely dependent on that person's genes. It has also been able to identify genes involved in the regulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, the body's primary stress response system. One gene of particular interest is the FKBP5 gene, which plays a role in regulating cortisol levels in response to stress. People with certain variants of the FKBP5 gene may have a blunted cortisol response to stress, leading to a reduced ability to cope with stressors. Other genes, such as the CRHR1 and CRHBP genes, are also involved in the HPA axis regulation, affecting cortisol levels in response to stress. How to manage stress. No discussion on the effects of stress on the body would be complete if it doesn't discuss how stress can effectively be managed. A well-known method of managing stress includes regular exercise. Exercise increases the level of endorphins in your body. These chemicals are natural, feel-good chemicals that help to counter stress. Moreover, exercise can help you sleep better, which is essential for managing stress. Other things that have been found effective are mindfulness and relaxation techniques, social support, time management, and above all, healthy lifestyle habits. As we wrap up this journey through the fascinating world of stress, it's clear that stress is not just a feeling, but a complex interplay of biological processes within our body. From the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis to cortisol's effects on the body, we've explored how the brain responds to chronic pressure. But understanding the neurobiology of stress is only half the battle. It's also important that we intentionally develop practical strategies for managing stress in our everyday lives. By prioritizing self-care, building social support networks, and finding healthy coping mechanisms, we can reduce the impact of stress on our mind and body. So remember, the next time you feel stressed, take a moment to pause, breathe, and reflect on the complex processes within your body. And know that with the right tools and support, you can manage stress and maintain your overall health and well-being. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the neurobiology of stress. If you found this content interesting, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more informative videos on mental health and well-being. Until next time, take care of yourself and prioritize your mental health.